Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into some powerful stuff. We've got excerpts from a sermon called Baptized in the Cloud and the Sea. And it's based on 1 Corinthians chapter 10, the first, 15 verses.
That's right. And our goal really is to unpack the spiritual meaning of baptism as this sermon presents it. We want to look at how it connects to that huge Exodus story,
Mm.
And maybe more importantly, think about what it means for how you live day to day.
Yeah, the backstory for the sermon itself is interesting. It was given right before a baptism ceremony, so you can tell right away it's aiming for something deeper than just explaining a church ritual. It jumps straight back to Israel crossing the Red Sea.
And Paul's language there, baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea.
Exactly. And remember, Paul's writing to the Corinthians here. They'd received amazing grace, but, well, they were struggling big time. Lots of moral issues, spiritual blind spots. So Paul's trying to shake them up, remind them who they actually are as baptized people.
Which brings us right back to the listener, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How deeply do you feel that? The gratitude, maybe even the awe connected to your own baptism, or just the whole idea of it. It's worth thinking about.
Definitely. So let's unpack this sermon's core ideas.
Okay, first off, the sermon just cuts right through the idea that baptism is only about the water. Whether it's a sprinkle or full immersion, or maybe just feeling like it makes you an official church member.
Right, like it's just step one on the checklist.
Yeah.
But Paul says, no, hold on. This connects directly to one of the biggest moments in the whole Old Testament, the Exodus. Specifically, 1 Corinthians 10, verses 1 and 2, the Red Sea crossing.
Yeah, he uses that phrase, doesn't he? Our ancestors were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. He's taking this massive historical event and using it to explain a really deep spiritual truth about our baptism.
Okay, so let's look at those two parts Paul mentions. First, baptized in the sea.
The sermon really focuses on Exodus 14 here, that whole dramatic escape through the parted waters. And the main point the sermon pulls from this image, it's about the break. The decisive, clear break from your old life, from that sinful, worldly past. Think about the Israelites literally leaving slavery in Egypt. They walked through the sea.
And the sermon really emphasizes this. Once they were on the other side, that was it. Egypt was behind them, the path back was gone, the waters didn't just open, they closed again, permanently.
Exactly. So baptism, in this picture, it marks the start of a brand new life, a life under God's grace.
Yeah.
And it means that old way of living, enslaved to sin, that path is just closed off.
Now, the sermon is careful here. It says baptism itself doesn't equal salvation, right? But the Exodus story shows us the pattern of how salvation works. It began with the Passover lamb, which points to Christ's sacrifice dealing with sin through blood.
Right, and then comes the Red Sea crossing, which points to baptism. That's where the old identity, the slave identity, dies. And the new person, the free person, is born.
Just imagine being there right before the crossing. It must have been terrifying. The sea right in front of them, Pharaoh's chariots thundering up behind. The sermon uses that image really powerfully.
It does. It shows that leaving the old life, leaving sin's grip, isn't usually easy. The world, the power of sin itself, it doesn't just say, okay, off you go.
No, it tempts you, right?
Right.
The sermon talks about this kind of spiritual no man's land, where maybe you go to church, you believe certain things, but you're still trying to hold on to the comforts or habits of the old world.
And the sermon's message on that is pretty stark. You can't stay there. God doesn't want that half-heartedness. He calls us out completely to be holy, set apart just for him.
So that act of crossing the sea, it's a step of faith, isn't it? Trusting God to make a way where there is no way and trusting him to shut the door behind you.
Absolutely. And remember what Moses said. The sermon quotes it from Exodus 14. Do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.
Wow. Just trusting God when it seems utterly hopeless. Waiting for him. That's where, as the sermon puts it, walls become doors. Because God acts.
And the meaning for us now, it's huge. If you've been baptized and shared this way, you're saying, I don't serve sin anymore. I don't serve that old master, Egypt. You're choosing to live as someone freed by God, for God. This is the path he chooses for his people.
And then the end of that scene, Pharaoh's army is drowned. The sermon uses that to show the salvation is offered, yes, but it's God's grace that actually brings people through. Baptism, that crossing, it's all his doing.
Yeah, it's a radical transformation. And that quote from 1 Peter 2 really captures it. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. going from nothing to his people.
Mm-hmm.
That should just flood us with gratitude, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the C part, the decisive break. Now, what about the cloud, baptized in the cloud?
Oh.
The sermon says this is different. Not a one-time event like the sea crossing.
Right. This refers to the next stage. The 40 years the Israelites wandered in the wilderness after they'd crossed the Red Sea.
Ah, the wilderness. Not exactly the promised land, is it? More like hardship, dryness.
Precisely. It's the picture of what it's like to live in this world, this often difficult, sin-affected world, after you've come to faith and made that break. It's a place where you face trials, things go wrong, you feel spiritually dry sometimes, your plans fall apart.
So what's the spiritual point of the wilderness journey then?
Well, it's where our own strength just gives out. It forces us, really, to rely completely, moment by moment, on God alone. It's interesting, too, the sermon mentions the Hebrew word for wilderness, midbar, comes from dabar, meaning to speak. So it's seen as this place where, maybe because everything else is stripped away, you can hear God's voice more clearly.
And the cloud itself, what role did it play?
The sermon describes it as this physical, visible cloud, kind of horizontal, providing shade from that harsh desert sun, but also guiding them. Following that cloud wasn't just about directions. It symbolized being under God's constant watch, his care, every single moment. That's being baptized in the cloud.
That ongoing protection.
Yeah.
It makes me think of that promise in 1 Corinthians 10:13. The sermon quotes it, right?
Yes, no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Even when you're facing struggles, temptations in your own wilderness, God is right there, faithful.
And he provided for them physically too, didn't he? Manna from heaven, water from a rock. Paul actually calls these spiritual food and drink.
Exactly. He connects the physical provision to the deeper spiritual reality. And Isaiah 41, also quoted, reinforces this idea of God's total care. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. It's like God saying, I've got this. I'm taking full responsibility for you on this journey.
And Paul explicitly says that spiritual rock they drank from, the one that followed them.
That rock was Christ.
Yes.
Christ himself is our source of strength, protection, that living water we need in the dry times. All this ongoing grace, the sermon argues, stems from being baptized in the cloud, living under God's constant guiding care.
I love that example the sermon used about Martin Luther, how he'd look in the mirror when he felt defeated and say, I am a baptized person.
Yeah, it wasn't just remembering a past event. He was claiming a present reality. Water baptism might be a single moment, but this cloud baptism, this living under God's grace and guidance, that's daily. It's about dying to your own strength and living by his grace every single day.
Okay, so this is huge. We've got this incredible grace, the decisive break symbolized by the sea, and the constant care symbolized by the cloud. So the crucial question the sermon raises is, how should we live in light of all that?
And this is where it gets challenging, because the sermon points out that even with all that grace, some of the Israelites didn't make it. They displeased God and died in the wilderness. And Paul uses their story as a direct warning to us. That's 1 Corinthians 10, verses 11 and 12.
And what was the root problem? The sermon identifies it as idolatry, right?
Yes, but maybe not in the way we usually think of it. Not just statues. It was about living to please themselves instead of living to please God. It's that temptation to drift back, to seek satisfaction in the things of the old world, Egypt, even after you've been set free. It's spiritual compromise.
Trying to have it both ways. But as God's chosen holy people, the sermon insists we can't keep wavering like that.
No. And that's where the sermon brings in Joshua's famous challenge at the end of his life, Joshua 24. Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It has to be a conscious, daily decision.
So the wilderness, for us, isn't just a historical place. It's like the reality of our lives now. It's where the path of following God intersects with the path of following our own desires, and we have to choose.
And trusting God means actively stopping that chase after our own desires. Because chasing those desires instead of him, the sermon argues, is a form of idolatry.
Paul really drives this home, doesn't he? In 1 Corinthians 10:1-12, these things happen to them as examples and were written down as warnings for us. And then that final warning, so if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall.
Yeah, those warnings are for us right now, living in these times, waiting for Christ's return. We need to stay alert, spiritually awake, stay humble, constantly remembering we stand only by his grace, the grace shown in both the sea and the cloud.
Okay, let's try to pull the threads together. What's the big picture from this sermon's look at baptism through Exodus and 1 Corinthians?
It's that baptism represents this incredibly profound spiritual reality. It's got two sides. That one-time decisive break from the past, like crossing the Red Sea. And it's about an ongoing daily journey of total dependence on God's care and guidance, like living under the cloud in the wilderness.
So now we bring it back to you, the listener. Thinking about this whole picture, the sea, the cloud, how does this challenge your life right now?
Are you really living out that decisive break symbolized by the sea? Or are parts of you still trying to linger in that no man's land, still drawn back to the old ways?
And are you recognizing God's presence with you now in the struggles, the dryness, that cloud baptism? Or are you trying to muscle through the wilderness on your own?
Are you making that conscious choice day by day? As for me, I will serve the Lord. Or is that subtle idolatry, living to please yourself, creeping back in?
And are you hearing those warnings from Paul? Staying humble, staying awake, remembering it's all grace that got you through the sea and keeps you going under the cloud.
The sermon really leaves us with this powerful thought. God is leading you, even when you can't see the path clearly. Even when His presence feels more like a cloud than a pillar of fire. The call is to follow Him, trust Him, and live lives that actually bring Him joy because you belong to Him.
So as we finish up this deep dive, we've seen how looking at baptism through this Exodus lens, like Paul did, just elevates it way beyond a simple ritual. It becomes this radical reality, a break from the past, and this ongoing journey of dependence on God's amazing grace.
And Paul leaves his readers, and us, with that challenge in verse 15. I speak to sensible people. Judge for yourselves what I say.
And maybe that's the final question for you today. How are you judging what we've talked about? This deep identity you have as one of God's people, rescued by grace, sustained by grace. And more than judging, how will that shape your choices tomorrow? How will you choose whom to serve, trusting His care through whatever wilderness you're facing?